Sign it, Daphne. Stop dragging out the inevitable. You look pathetic, holding onto a pen like it's a lifeline. Felix sneered, checking his Rolex. You promised, for better or worse, Daphne whispered, her hand trembling over the settlement papers. That was before I realized worse was your entire personality. I'm upgrading. Hope is waiting in the car, and frankly, she has places to be that don't involve watching you cry over a studio apartment allowance. Sign the papers, take your petty cash, and vanish. The ink on the divorce decree was barely dry when Felix Lawson stood up, smoothing the front of his bespoke Italian suit. He didn't look at Daphne Carter, formerly Lawson, as a person. He looked at her the way one looks at a leased vehicle that had exceeded its mileage limit, with a mix of boredom and relief that the contract was finally terminated. The conference room in the downtown high-rise was cold, smelling of lemon polish and aggressive litigation. You have 30 days to vacate the house, Felix said, sliding his phone into his pocket. Hope wants to start renovations immediately. She finds the current decor depressing, too much beige. It reflects a lack of ambition. Daphne sat frozen. She was 32, but in that moment she felt ancient. 10 years. She had given him 10 years of her life, supporting him while he built Lawson Logistics from a garage startup into a multi-million-dollar shipping empire. She had worked 2 jobs so he wouldn't have to take out loans. She had clipped coupons so he could buy client dinners. I have nowhere to go, Felix, she said, her voice hollow. The settlement. It's barely enough for a deposit in this city. Felix laughed. It was a sharp, barking sound that lacked any genuine humor. That's not my problem, is it? That's the free market, Daphne. You failed to invest in yourself. You stayed a housewife while I became a mogul. You're a depreciating asset. Hope, on the other hand, she's a partner. She's vice president of marketing. She brings value. He walked to the door where Hope Payne was leaning against the frame. Hope was everything Daphne wasn't right now, glowing, sharp-edged, and draped in designer silk that cost more than Daphne's car. Hope didn't even look at Daphne. She was too busy inspecting her manicured nails. Ready, darling? Hope asked, her voice like syrup laced with arsenic. We have that dinner with Gavin Lennox tonight. We need to secure that merger. Coming, Felix said. He paused, looking back at Daphne one last time. Don't contact me. If you need money, get a job. I hear Starbucks is hiring. You were always good at serving people. They left. The heavy oak door clicked shut, leaving Daphne alone in the silence. She didn't scream. She didn't throw the water pitcher against the wall, though every nerve in her body screamed for release. Instead, she slowly capped her pen. The silence of the room felt heavy, pressing against her chest. She had defined herself by him for so long that without him, she felt like an outline of a person, transparent and fading. Her phone buzzed. It was Addison Jennings, her best friend, the only one who hadn't taken Felix's side when the money started rolling in. I'm outside, the text read. I have wine, I have pizza, and I have a shovel if we need to bury a body. Daphne managed a weak, watery smile. She picked up her purse, which felt lighter now that the house keys were gone. She walked out of the building, the wind whipping her hair across her face. On the curb, Felix's silver Porsche 911 GT3 was pulling away. Daphne saw Hope laugh at something Felix said, her head thrown back, her hand resting possessively on his knee. They looked like a golden couple from a magazine advertisement. Daphne looked down at her scuffed heels and realized Felix was right about one thing. She had let herself disappear to make room for his ego. But as the Porsche roared down the avenue, cutting off a taxi, Daphne felt a strange, cold sensation in her gut. It wasn't sorrow anymore. It was the absolute zero of a heart freezing over, 3 weeks later, Daphne was scrubbing the grease trap of a diner on the south side of the city. The petty cash Felix had mentioned had gone almost entirely to paying off the debts he had secretly racked up in her name. Joint credit cards she didn't know existed until the credit score alert started pinging. He had ruined her credit to leverage his business expansion years ago, and now, legally, half that debt was hers. "Table 4 needs a refill, Carter," the manager barked. "On it," Daphne said, wiping her hands on her apron. She was exhausted. Her hair, once kept in soft waves, was pulled back in a severe, fraying bun. Her hands were red and chapped. She was refilling a coffee for a trucker when the news played on the small television mounted in the corner. "Tech mogul and recluse, Arthur Carter, dead at 68, the anchor announced. Daphne froze. The pot of coffee trembled in her hand, splashing hot liquid onto the saucer. "Hey, watch it," the trucker grumbled. Daphne didn't hear him. She stared at the screen. They showed a photo of a man she hadn't seen in 15 years. Arthur Carter. Her father. He had left when she was 12. He had been a dreamer, an inventor, always tinkering in the shed, always promising his next big thing would save them. But the money never came. The arguments with her mother got louder, and one day he just walked out. Daphne had heard rumors he went to Silicon Valley, but she assumed he had failed there too. She had sent him an invitation to her wedding 10 years ago. It had been returned to sender. "Dead?" she whispered. She finished her shift in a daze. When she got back to the tiny, damp basement apartment she was renting from Addison's uncle, she sat on the edge of the mattress and stared at the wall. Her phone rang. It was an unknown number. "Is this Daphne Carter?" A deep, resonant voice asked. "Yes," she said, her voice raspy. "This is Uriel Walker, from Walker and Associates. I represent the estate of the late Arthur Carter. I need you to come to my office tomorrow at 10 a.m. for the reading of the will." Daphne frowned. "Mr. Walker, I think there's a mistake. My father, he didn't have an estate. He left us with nothing. Please, Miss Carter, it is mandatory. And bring identification. There are complexities." Daphne agreed, mostly out of curiosity. She expected perhaps a box of old trinkets, maybe some apology letters, or worse, more debt. Meanwhile, across town, in a sprawling penthouse overlooking the skyline, Felix Lawson was sipping a scotch while Hope scrolled through her tablet. "Did you see?" Hope asked, looking up. "Daphne's dad died." Felix snorted. "That old deadbeat? I'm surprised he wasn't buried in a pauper's grave years ago. Daphne probably has to pay for the funeral. Good thing we finalized the divorce, or she'd come begging for burial costs." "Actually," Hope said, her eyes narrowing as she read the business section of a niche tech blog. "It says here Arthur Carter was the silent partner in Obsidian Ventures." "Felix, didn't you try to get funding from Obsidian last year? They're huge." Felix froze. "Obsidian? No, that's impossible. Obsidian is run by a board of ghosts. Nobody knows who the majority shareholder is." The article speculates it was him. It says he held patents for semiconductor cooling systems used by, well, everyone, including us. Felix set his drink down, his mind racing. If Daphne's father was wealthy, secretly wealthy, and Daphne was his next of kin. "She doesn't know," Felix whispered. A slow, predatory smile spread across his face. "She thinks he was a bum. She has no idea what that estate is worth." "So?" Hope asked. "You're divorced. You get nothing." "Not necessarily," Felix said, standing up and pacing. "There was a loan 5 years ago, when the business was shaky. I took a private loan from a shell company to keep us afloat. I signed a personal guarantee. That shell company, I traced the IP address once, to a holding firm in Nevada. If that was Carter. You owe him money? No, Felix grinned. I defaulted on a technicality and countersued the shell company for predatory interest rates. It's been stuck in arbitration. If he's dead and Daphne is the heir, I can manipulate the debt. I can claim the estate owes me. Or better yet, I can get Daphne to sign over her rights to the estate in exchange for forgiving the debts she thinks she has. She's desperate, Hope noted, catching on. She's broke. Exactly. I'll go to the reading. As a creditor to the estate, I have a right to be present. Felix grabbed his jacket. Get dressed, Hope. We're going to pay my ex-wife one last visit. The offices of Walker and Associates were not in a glass skyscraper like Felix's firm. They were located in a restored pre-war brownstone in the historic district. The building smelled of old money, mahogany, leather, and silence. Daphne arrived 15 minutes early, wearing her only remaining good suit, a black blazer she had saved from the donation pile. She tried to smooth her hair, feeling painfully out of place among the oil paintings and Persian rugs. Miss Carter? She turned. Standing by the window was a man who looked less like a lawyer and more like a weary general. Uriel Walker was tall, with broad shoulders that strained his charcoal suit. He had salt and pepper hair and eyes that were a startling, piercing grey. He wasn't classically handsome like Felix. He was intense. I'm Uriel Walker, he said, extending a hand. His grip was firm, warm, and reassuring. Thank you for coming. Mr. Walker, I don't understand why I'm here, Daphne began. My father. Your father was a complicated man, Daphne, but he watched you. From a distance. Before she could ask what that meant, the heavy double door swung open. The air in the room seemed to suck out instantly. Felix Lawson walked in, wearing a navy pinstripe suit, looking like he owned the building. Hope Payne was on his arm, dressed in a white ensemble that looked more appropriate for a yacht party than a legal proceeding. Daphne stood up, her heart hammering against her ribs. What are you doing here? Relax, sweetie, Felix said, breezing past her to sit in one of the leather wingback chairs. I'm here on business. Your father and I had outstanding financial entanglements. As a creditor, I'm an interested party. You knew my father? Daphne asked, confused. I knew a shell company he apparently hid behind, Felix corrected. He looked at Uriel. You must be the executor. I have the paperwork regarding the liens I hold against the Carter assets. I'm willing to settle for a lump sum, provided the estate has liquidity. If not, he glanced at Daphne with mock pity. I suppose I'll have to seize whatever assets are left. I'd hate for Daphne to inherit nothing but bankruptcy. Uriel Walker didn't blink. He walked slowly to his desk, placed a thick folder down, and looked at Felix with an expression of utter calm. Mr. Lawson, Uriel said, his voice a low rumble. You seem to be under the impression that this is a negotiation. Everything is a negotiation, Felix smirked. Daphne, listen to me. The estate is likely underwater. If you sign your executor rights over to me, I'll absorb the debt. I'll even give you $10,000, enough to get you out of that basement. Hope chimed in, checking her nails. Take it, Daphne. It's generous. Felix is being a saint. Daphne looked at Felix. She saw the greed in his eyes. She saw the contempt. Then she looked at Uriel. The lawyer was watching her, waiting. There was a slight nod, almost imperceptible from him. No, Daphne said. Her voice shook, but she stood her ground. I don't want your money, Felix, and I don't want your help. Have it your way, Felix sneered. Prepare to inherit a mountain of debt. Just then, the door opened again. A young woman rushed in, breathless, carrying a motorcycle helmet. It was Kayla Carter, Daphne's estranged younger sister. She looked rough, dyed purple hair, a leather jacket, looking like she'd been crying for days. "I made it," Kayla gasped. She looked at Daphne, then at Felix. "What is he doing here?" "He's leaving," Uriel said calmly. "I'm staying," Felix countered. "Read the will, Walker." Uriel sat down. He opened the folder. The silence in the room was absolute. Even the ticking of the grandfather clock seemed to stop. "Arthur Carter's last will and testament is unusual," Uriel began, his eyes locking onto Felix's. "It is not a distribution of liquid cash. It is a transfer of control." "Control of what?" Hope asked, bored. "A garage full of rusty parts." Uriel turned a page. Arthur Carter was the sole proprietor of Aegis Dynamics and the majority shareholder of Obsidian Ventures. His estate is valued, conservatively, at $4.2 billion. The sound that left Felix's throat was a strangled gasp. Hope dropped her phone. It hit the floor with a loud crack. Daphne grabbed the edge of the desk to steady herself. "Billion?" "However," Uriel continued, his voice hardening as he looked directly at Felix, "there are conditions, strict ones, and there is a specific clause regarding the Judas element." Uriel turned his gaze to Daphne. "Your father knew everything, Daphne. He knew about the cheating, he knew about the divorce, and he knew about the mockery. He spent the last year of his life setting this up." Uriel pulled a small silver flash drive from the envelope and set it on the desk. "Shall we begin?" The room was silent enough to hear the hum of the hard drive spinning as Uriel connected it to the large monitor on the wall. The air conditioner hummed a low, ominous note, vibrating through the mahogany table. The screen flickered to life, static washing over the room before resolving into a clear image. It revealed a man sitting in a high-tech, dimly lit office. Arthur Carter looked frail, the pallor of sickness clinging to his skin like a second suit. Oxygen tubes were hooked into his nose, and a heart monitor beeped rhythmically in the background. Yet, despite the frailty of his body, his eyes were sharp, intelligent, and blazing with a cold, terrifying fire. "Hello, Daphne. Hello, Kayla," the video Arthur said. His voice was raspy, scraped raw by illness, but it held a command that made Daphne sit straighter. "If you are watching this, I am gone. And if my calculations are correct, and they usually are, Felix Lawson is sitting in the room." Arthur leaned closer to the camera lens, his face filling the screen. "Likely wearing a suit that cost more than my first car, checking his watch, and looking for a payout." Felix stiffened in his chair, his face flushing a dull red. "This is ridiculous. He's senile. Can we skip the theatrics and get to the numbers?" "Quiet," Uriel commanded. The word wasn't shouted. It was dropped like a heavy stone, silencing the room instantly. On the screen, Arthur continued. "I didn't leave when you were children, because I didn't love you. I left because I was being hunted by corporate sharks who wanted my algorithms. I had to disappear to keep you safe. But I never looked away. I watched you, Daphne. I watched you struggle. I watched you work 2 jobs. And I watched you marry a man who I knew, within 5 minutes of researching him, was a narcissist with a penchant for cooking books and breaking spirits." Daphne's hand flew to her mouth to stifle a sob. He had known. All this time, when she thought she was screaming into the void, her father had been listening. "I built Obsidian Ventures to protect you," Arthur continued, his voice softening slightly before hardening again. "But I couldn't give it to you while you were still under his thumb. He would have drained it dry. He would have used my life's work to fuel his vanity projects. So I waited. I waited for him to discard you. I knew he would. Men like Felix don't keep things they can't exploit. They upgrade, they leverage, and they liquidate." Arthur chuckled, a dry, rattling sound that ended in a cough. He took a sip of water, his hand trembling. Now, for the business. To my daughter Kayla, I leave the research division of Aegis Dynamics and a trust of $50 million. You always had a rebellious streak, kid. You hated authority. Use this money to break things and build better ones. Kayla sat stunned, clutching her motorcycle helmet so hard her knuckles turned white. $50 million? She whispered, looking at Daphne with wide, tear-filled eyes. He remembered I liked engineering. And to Daphne, Arthur said. The camera seemed to zoom in, focusing intensely on his eldest daughter. I leave the remainder of the estate, the $4 billion in diversified assets, the real estate portfolio, the patent library, and the controlling interest in Obsidian Ventures. The silence in the room was absolute. A pin dropping would have sounded like a gunshot. However, Arthur raised a crooked finger, there is a condition. I call it the Judas Protocol. Clause 4, Section A. Uriel read aloud from the document on his desk, his voice steady and devoid of emotion. The beneficiary, Daphne Carter, must assume the role of CEO of Obsidian Ventures. She cannot sell the company for a period of 5 years. Furthermore, she must personally oversee the portfolio of distressed assets. Distressed assets? Felix scoffed, finding his voice again. He leaned back, crossing his arms. Junk bonds? Bad loans? Worthless. He's leaving you a garbage dump, Daphne. Not all of them, Arthur said from the screen, a smirk twisting his lips as if he had heard Felix's interruption. You see, Felix, when your logistics company started failing 3 years ago, right around the time you bought that yacht you couldn't afford, you took a loan from a shadow lender called Vantablack Holdings. Felix went still. The arrogance evaporated, replaced by a dawn of horror. You signed a personal guarantee, Arthur recounted with relish. You were so desperate to keep up appearances, to keep the stock price inflated, that you put up everything. Your intellectual property, your fleet, your personal real estate, even the penthouse you're currently sleeping in. Felix went pale. The blood drained from his face so fast, he looked like wax. Vantablack, that's a shell company. It's anonymous. My shell company, Arthur whispered. I bought your debt, Felix. I own your loans. I own your trucks. I own the chair you're sitting in. And now, Daphne owns them. The revelation hit the room like a physical blow. Hope Payne shifted away from Felix, inching her chair to the right. Her eyes darted between the screen and Daphne, the mental calculator behind her gaze working overtime. The condition of Daphne's inheritance, Arthur continued, is that she must decide the fate of Lawson Logistics. She has 1 year. She can choose to forgive the debt, effectively handing you a clean slate, a gift you do not deserve, or she can call it in. Immediate repayment, full liquidation, bankruptcy. You can't do that, Felix jumped up, slamming his hands on the table, rattling the water pitcher. That's a conflict of interest. It's malicious. It's entrapment. It's business, Uriel said calmly, not even blinking. You signed the contract, Mr. Lawson. You defaulted on the interest payment 6 months ago. Arthur didn't foreclose then because he was waiting for this moment. The debt is now callable on demand. Today, tomorrow, whenever Miss Carter chooses. Arthur's image began to fade, the light in the video dimming. The ball is in your court, Daphne. You spent 10 years serving a man who thought you were nothing. Now, you hold his life in your hands. Don't disappoint me. The screen went black. For a long moment, no one moved. Then, Felix turned to Daphne. His charm switched on like a desperate, flickering light bulb. He rounded the table, ignoring the security guards who stepped forward. Daphne, listen, he said, his voice dropping to that intimate, persuasive tone he used to use when he wanted her to sign a loan co-application. Your father was insane. He was a bitter, dying old man. He didn't understand the market. We can work this out. I can run Obsidian for you. You don't know how to handle $1 billion portfolio. You'll crash it in a week. The sharks will eat you alive. He reached for her hand, but she pulled it back as if he were burning hot. Sign the debt forgiveness, Felix pressed, sweat beading on his forehead. And I'll give you a consultant role, a salary, real money. I'll take care of you, Daphne. Like I always did. Daphne looked at him, really looked at him. For the first time in 10 years, the fog lifted. She didn't see the powerful tycoon or the brilliant husband. She saw a sweating, panicked man in a suit he technically didn't own, begging for mercy from the woman he had called a depreciating asset less than a month ago. She stood up. Her legs were shaking, vibrating with adrenaline, but her voice was surprisingly steady. "Mr. Walker," Daphne said, her eyes never leaving Felix's face, "I'd like to accept the inheritance, and I'd like to review the files on Lawson Logistics immediately." "Daphne!" Felix shouted, lunging forward, his composure shattering. 2 large security guards materialized at the door, blocking his path. Uriel stood, towering over the desk, closing the file with a finality that echoed like a judge's gavel. "Mr. Lawson, Ms. Payne," Uriel said, "you are trespassing on private property. And since Ms. Carter now holds the mortgage note on the building your penthouse is located in, yes, Arthur bought that too. I suggest you be very polite. You have rent to pay, and I believe you are already in arrears." Felix was dragged out, screaming about lawyers, lawsuits, and fairness. Hope Payne followed, but she didn't scream. She didn't look at Felix. She looked back at Daphne, her expression unreadable, calculating, and for the first time, fearful. When the heavy oak doors finally clicked closed, the silence returned. Daphne sank back into the chair, the adrenaline crashing. She put her head in her hands and let out a shuddering breath. "Breathe," Kayla said, reaching out to touch her sister's shoulder awkwardly. "Just breathe, Daph. You didn't faint. That's a win." "I can't run a company," Daphne whispered, looking at her calloused hands. "I scrub grease traps. I clip coupons. I don't know what a distressed asset actually is." "You managed a narcissist for a decade," Uriel said gently, walking over to pour her a glass of water. "You balanced a budget on $0 while he spent thousands. You anticipated the moods of a tyrant to keep peace in your home. Running a company is easy compared to walking on eggshells every day. And you won't be alone. I served your father for 20 years. I serve you now. The transformation didn't happen overnight. It wasn't a movie montage of shopping sprees and makeovers. It was a grueling, painful process of shedding skin, layer by agonizing layer. Daphne moved out of the basement and into her father's estate, a modernist fortress of glass and steel hidden in the hills overlooking the city. It was cold, vast, and filled with the ghosts of the man she barely knew. For the first month, she barely slept. Uriel was a demanding teacher. He didn't coddle her. He spent 12 hours a day drilling her on corporate finance, asset management, and the intricate web of companies Obsidian controlled. "Again," Uriel said one Tuesday night, pointing to a spreadsheet projected on the wall. "Why is this acquisition a risk?" "Because the debt-to-equity ratio is too high," Daphne recited, rubbing her tired eyes. "And their market share is being eroded by digital competitors." "Good. And this one?" "It's a trap. The assets are inflated." "Excellent. But the hardest lessons weren't about math. They were about power." "You have to be harder," Uriel scolded her one afternoon, as Daphne hesitated over firing a corrupt manager in one of their subsidiaries. The man was crying, showing her pictures of his kids. He stole from the pension fund, Daphne. He took money from the workers to pay for his gambling. Pity is a luxury you cannot afford. I don't want to be like Felix, she argued, her voice rising. I don't want to be heartless. You won't be, Uriel said, his voice soft but unyielding. Felix destroys people to feed his ego. You remove people to protect the collective. There is a difference. If you keep him, you hurt the 1,000 honest employees who work for him. Choose. She fired the manager. Afterward, she went to the bathroom and threw up. But the next day, she woke up, put on a tailored suit, and went back to work. It felt terrible, and then, strangely, it felt empowering. The real turning point came 6 weeks in, when Uriel gave her the key to the Black Ledger. It wasn't a physical book, but a secure, encrypted server containing all the dirt Arthur had gathered on Felix over the years. Daphne sat in her father's office, the glow of the monitor illuminating her face in the dark. June 2018. Felix diverts $50,000 from joint savings to purchase diamond bracelet for client acquisition. Recipient, Hope Payne. August 2019. Felix takes out second mortgage on Daphne's childhood home, forged signature, to cover gambling losses in Macau. Note, Daphne was told the bank made an error. December 2021. Felix tells Daphne the company is broke and she needs to sell her jewelry. Real status. Hidden offshore account balance, $1.2 million. Daphne read until her eyes burned. She had believed him. When he said they were broke, she had sold her grandmother's ring, the only heirloom she had left. She had cried, giving it to the pawnbroker. Felix had held her, told her she was brave, and then likely gone to a steak dinner with Hope, using the money she had just sacrificed. He hadn't just cheated on her physically. He had systematically dismantled her financial security, her history, and her reality to build a golden parachute for himself. He had stolen her past to pay for his future. He's not just a cheater, Daphne whispered to the empty room, her voice trembling with a rage she had never allowed herself to feel. He's a thief. He stole 10 years of my life. The intercom buzzed, startling her. Ms. Carter, there is a Mr. Gavin Lennox on line 1. He says it's urgent regarding the port merger. Daphne stared at the screen for a second longer, then closed the file. She straightened her spine, wiping a tear from her cheek. Gavin Lennox, the billionaire industrialist Felix, was desperate to impress, the key to Felix's salvation. Put him through, she said, her voice ice-cold. Meanwhile, at the Lawson Logistics headquarters, the atmosphere was toxic. Felix was hemorrhaging money. The news of the hostile takeover of his debt hadn't gone public yet, but the rumor mill was churning. Suppliers were demanding cash up front. "Fix it, Felix," Hope snapped. She was pacing his office, which looked significantly emptier. He had sold the art off the walls, a Basquiat print and a rare sculpture, to make payroll last week. "I can't live like this. My credit card was declined at Saks today. Do you know how embarrassing that is?" The salesgirl actually smirked at me. "It's temporary," Felix roared, slamming the phone down. "Daphne won't do it. She doesn't have the guts. She's bluffing. She's trying to scare me into a settlement." "She's not the one scaring me," Hope said quietly, leaning against the window. "It's the silence. She hasn't answered your calls. She hasn't sued. She hasn't screamed. She's just waiting. It's like watching a tsunami pull the water back from the shore." "I have a plan," Felix said, his eyes wild and bloodshot. He hadn't slept in days. "The annual Tech Innovators Gala is next week. Everyone will be there. Gavin Lennox is receiving the Man of the Year award. I'm going to corner him. Once I secure the merger with Lennox Industries, I'll have enough capital to pay off the debt to Obsidian in one lump sum. I'll be free of her." "Lennox won't talk to you," Hope said, shaking her head. You're radioactive, Felix. Everyone knows you're leveraged to the hilt. He will. Felix smoothed his hair, a manic grin spreading across his face. Because I have dirt on his competitor. I play dirty, Hope. You know that. It's how I got you. It's how I built this company. Hope looked at him with a mixture of disgust and dawning realization. Is that supposed to be a compliment? Just get a dress, Felix muttered, turning back to his computer, dismissing her. A cheap one. Oh, we're on a budget. No more Dior. Hope walked out of the office, the door clicking shut behind her. She went into the bathroom, locked the door, and pulled out her phone. Her thumb hovered over a number she had saved from the business card Uriel Walker had given everyone at the will reading. She didn't call. Not yet. But she didn't delete the number either. She looked at herself in the mirror, the stress lines appearing around her eyes, and realized she was looking at the new Daphne, and she refused to be the next depreciating asset. The annual Tech Innovators Gala was a spectacle of excess. The ballroom of the Grand Meridian was transformed into a glittering cavern of gold and crystal. Champagne fountains flowed with vintage Dom Perignon. Ice sculptures of circuit boards melted slowly under the lights, and the hum of billions of dollars in net worth filled the air. Felix Lawson arrived wearing a tuxedo that was 3 years old. It was slightly tight around the waist, a subtle sign of his stress eating, and lacked the crisp newness of the suits around him. Hope wore a black dress that was elegant but simple, bought off the rack, a stark contrast to the custom couture worn by the wives and partners of the other tycoons. Felix was sweating. He scanned the room, his eyes darting frantically. He ignored the pitying looks from former associates, the way groups of men would stop talking as he approached and pivot away. "Showtime," Felix muttered, wiping his palms on his trousers. He grabbed 2 glasses of champagne and made a beeline for the center of the room. "Gavin, my good friend," Felix boomed, forcing a smile that looked like a grimace. Gavin Lennox, a silver-haired titan of industry, known for his integrity and ruthless efficiency, turned slowly. He was surrounded by a circle of admirers, but they parted as Felix approached, not out of respect, but out of awkwardness. "Felix," Gavin said, his tone neutral. "I didn't think you'd have the time to attend. Aren't you busy restructuring?" "Minor hiccups," Felix waved a hand dismissively, stepping too close. "Actually, I wanted to discuss the port expansion. I have some new projections that will blow your mind. Returns of 20% within Q1. I can undercut the competition by 15%. "I'm afraid that's off the table, Felix," Gavin said coldly, taking a sip of his drink. "We've found a new logistics partner, one with more stability and transparency." "Who?" Felix demanded, his voice rising, cracking slightly. "Who could possibly handle your volume? I'm the best in the city. Everyone else is a dinosaur." "That would be Obsidian Ventures," a cool, melodic voice said from the top of the grand staircase. Felix spun around. The entire room went silent. Daphne Carter stood at the top of the velvet-carpeted stairs leading into the ballroom. She was unrecognizable. The fraying bun and oversized sweaters were gone. In their place stood a woman who looked like she had been forged in fire. She wore a deep emerald gown that looked like liquid metal, structured at the shoulders and flowing like water to the floor. It was aggressive, expensive, and stunning. Her hair was cut into a sleek, sharp bob that accentuated her jawline. She wore no jewelry except for a simple diamond pin on her lapel, the Obsidian logo. Uriel stood a step behind her, ever the loyal guard dog, looking imposing in a tuxedo. "Daphne," Felix whispered, the name falling from his lips like a prayer. "Hello, Felix," Daphne said, descending the stairs. Every step was measured, graceful. She didn't look down. She looked straight at him. "I believe you know my new partner, Mr. Lennox." "You?" Felix sputtered, laughing nervously, looking around for support that wasn't there. "You're partnering with Lennox. You don't know the first thing about shipping lanes. You think this is a game? You're going to ruin him." Daphne reached the bottom of the stairs and stopped a few feet from him. The crowd formed a circle, sensing blood in the water. "Actually," Daphne said, her voice projecting clearly through the silent room without shouting, "I know quite a bit about your shipping lanes, Felix. I know about the phantom shipments you logged in 2022 to inflate your stock price. I know about the bribes paid to customs officials in Panama to bypass safety inspections. And I know that your efficiency model is based on underpaying your drivers and falsifying their sleep logs." The crowd gasped. Whispers erupted like wildfire. Gavin Lennox looked at Felix with pure, unadulterated disdain. "That's slander!" Felix screamed, his face turning a violent shade of purple. Veins bulged in his neck. "I'll sue you. I'll take everything. You're a bitter ex-wife trying to destroy a successful man." "It's not slander if it's in your own ledger," Daphne said calmly. She signaled Uriel. Uriel handed a tablet to Gavin Lennox. Gavin scrolled for a moment, his eyebrows raising higher with every swipe. "This is—" Gavin looked at Felix. "This is federal fraud, Felix. You are charging me for premium secure transport and shipping my goods on unbonded third-party trucks. It's faked. She forged it." Felix lunged toward Daphne, his hands curled into claws. Uriel stepped forward, blocking him with a chest like a concrete wall. "I wouldn't, Mr. Lawson." "You stole my life!" Felix shouted, spit flying, his dignity completely gone. "You were nothing. You were a maid with a ring. You owe me everything. I made you." Daphne didn't flinch. She didn't step back. She stepped closer, invading his space until she was staring up into his wild eyes. "I don't owe you a thing, Felix, but you owe me. Specifically, you owe Obsidian Ventures $112 million. And as of this morning, I've decided to exercise the Judas Protocol." She pulled back, her eyes cold as the ocean. "I'm calling in the debt. You have 24 hours to pay in full, or I seize Lawson Logistics and sell it for scrap. I will strip the assets, sell the fleet, and dissolve the brand." "You can't," Felix whimpered, shrinking in on himself. "It will destroy me." "That," Daphne said, turning her back on him, the emerald dress swirling around her legs, "is the free market. Isn't that what you told me? I'm just upgrading to a better investment." She walked away, taking Gavin Lennox's arm. "Shall we discuss the new sustainable fuel initiative, Gavin?" "We shall, Miss Carter," Gavin said, turning his back on Felix. The room followed suit. Slowly, agonizingly, the conversations started up again. Backs turned. Felix was left standing alone in the center of the ballroom, a ghost in a rented tuxedo. Hope Payne stood by the champagne tower, gripping her glass until her knuckles were white. She watched Felix trembling, humiliated, finished. Then she looked at Daphne, who was laughing at something Gavin said, a genuine, free laugh. Hope set her glass down. She didn't go to comfort Felix. She didn't rush to his side. Instead, she turned and walked toward the exit, her heels clicking on the marble. She checked her phone and hit call on the number she had saved. "Mr. Walker," she said into the phone as she pushed through the heavy doors into the cool night air. "I think we need to talk. I have information on where Felix hid the offshore money. I want to make a deal." The interrogation room was actually a private conference suite at Obsidian Ventures. But to Hope Payne, it felt like a prison cell. The walls were glass, overlooking the city she had tried so hard to conquer. But now she was on the inside, looking out at a world that was rapidly shrinking. Daphne sat at the head of the table. She didn't look angry. She looked tired. Beside her, Uriel Walker was arranging a series of digital recorders. "You said you have information," Daphne said, her voice devoid of the warmth Hope used to exploit. "Talk." Hope took a shaky breath. She wasn't wearing designer silk today. She was in jeans and a sweater, clutching a battered laptop bag. "I want a deal. I want immunity from the civil suits Obsidian is filing against Felix. And I want a one-way ticket to London. I have a job offer there. I want to disappear." "We aren't the FBI, Miss Payne," Uriel rumbled. "We can't grant immunity." "But you can choose who you sue," Hope countered, her eyes hard. "Felix told me to sign things. He made me a signatory on the shell accounts in the Cayman Islands. If you sue him, I go down with him. Unless you drop me from the docket." Daphne leaned forward. "Why should I let you walk away? You were there, Hope. You laughed when he kicked me out." "I did," Hope admitted. She didn't apologize. She knew it wouldn't land. "I'm a survivor, Daphne, just like you're becoming. Felix is a sinking ship. I'm not drowning for a man who would use me as a human shield." She slid a USB drive across the table. "It's not just offshore accounts," Hope whispered. "It's the cargo manifests. Felix wasn't just cooking the books on profits. He was smuggling." Daphne's eyes widened. "Smuggling? High-end electronics to embargoed regions," Hope explained. "He was using Lawson Logistics to move dual-use technology. He falsified the end-user certificates. That's federal, Daphne. That's treason adjacent. If you have this, you don't just bankrupt him. You bury him." Daphne looked at the drive. It was a small piece of plastic, but it held the weight of a nuclear bomb. "He promised me the world," Hope said, her voice cracking for the first time. "But last night, after the gala, he tried to transfer the remaining funds from our joint account to a crypto wallet only he controls. He was going to run and leave me to face the feds alone. That's why I'm here." Daphne picked up the drive. She looked at Uriel, who gave a grim nod. "Get her a flight," Daphne said quietly. "But Hope?" Hope paused at the door. "Don't ever come back," Daphne said. "Next time I won't be looking for justice. I'll be looking for revenge." Hope nodded, a ghost of respect in her eyes, and walked out. Daphne plugged in the drive. The screen filled with manifests, bank transfers and emails. It was worse than she thought. Felix hadn't just been greedy. He had been reckless to the point of madness. "He's done," Uriel said, closing the laptop. "This goes to the FBI immediately." "Do it," Daphne said. "But Uriel, I want to be there when they take him. The deadline for the debt repayment was 5 p.m. At 4:45 p.m., Felix Lawson was in his office, shredding documents. His tie was undone, his hair wild. He had been calling favors all day, but nobody picked up. The scene at the gala had gone viral. Lawson fraud was trending on Twitter. He grabbed his passport from the safe. He had a bag packed. He just needed to get to the private airfield. He had a pilot who owed him a favor. Or so he thought. "I'm the victim here," Felix muttered to himself, shoving cash into a duffel bag. "She manipulated me. She set me up." He moved to the door, but it didn't open. He jiggled the handle. Locked. "Open the door!" he screamed, pounding on the wood. The electronic lock beeped, and the door swung open. But it wasn't his secretary. Standing in the hallway were 6 federal agents in windbreakers marked FBI. Behind them, watching with a stoic expression, was Daphne Carter. "Felix Lawson," the lead agent announced, stepping forward. "You are under arrest for wire fraud, money laundering, and violation of international export control laws." "No!" Felix backed away, tripping over his duffel bag. "This is a mistake. My ex-wife. She planted it. She's trying to ruin me." "We have your signature on the manifests, Mr. Lawson," the agent said, cuffing him. "And we have the testimony of your VP of Marketing, Hope Payne." Felix froze. "Hope?" "She turned state's evidence this morning," the agent confirmed. Felix looked past the agents to Daphne. She stood in the sleek hallway of the building he had built, wearing a simple black coat. She didn't look happy. She didn't look sad. She looked resolved. "Daphne!" Felix shouted as they dragged him forward. "Daphne, please, I'm sorry. I was stressed. We can fix this. I love you. I always loved you." Daphne stepped forward. The agents paused, allowing her a moment. She looked down at the man who had defined her worth for a decade. He was crying now, snot running down his face, begging like a child. "You don't love anyone, Felix," she said softly. "You only love the reflection of yourself you see in their eyes. And right now, you look ugly." "Daphne, help me." "I am helping you," she said. "I'm teaching you the one thing you never learned. Actions have consequences." She turned to Uriel. "Let's go. I have a board meeting." As the elevator doors closed, Felix's screams echoed down the corridor, eventually cut off by the heavy thud of the law closing in 1 year later. The cemetery was quiet, the autumn leaves crunching under Daphne's boots. She placed a bouquet of white lilies on the grave marked Arthur Carter. "I wish I had known you," she whispered. "But I think I'm getting to know you now." "He would have been proud," a voice said. Daphne turned. Kayla was standing there, holding 2 coffees. Her purple hair was gone, replaced by a darker, natural shade, though she still wore her leather jacket. "Hey, sis," Kayla said, handing her a cup. "How's the research lab?" Daphne asked. "Insane," Kayla grinned. "We just patented a new water filtration system for arid climates. Uriel says the profit margins are thin, but the humanitarian impact is huge." "We'll subsidize it," Daphne said immediately. "Pull the funds from the logistics division. Carter Global, is having a record quarter." "You're good at this," Kayla noted, bumping her shoulder against Daphne's. "The boss lady thing." "I had to be," Daphne said, looking at the skyline in the distance. The past year had been a whirlwind. The trial of Felix Lawson had been the media event of the decade. He was sentenced to 20 years in federal prison. The assets of Lawson Logistics were seized, and Daphne had bought them back at auction for pennies on the dollar, rebranding the company and rehiring the drivers with better pay and benefits. She hadn't just taken his company, she had fixed it. "Have you heard from him?" Kayla asked. "He sends letters," Daphne said, "asking for money for the commissary, blaming his lawyers. I don't read them." "Good." They walked out of the cemetery together. 2 sisters who had been broken by different men in different ways, now rebuilding the world their father left them. A black sedan waited at the curb. Uriel opened the rear door. "Meeting with the investors in an hour, Miss Carter," Uriel said, "and Mr. Lennox sent flowers. Again." Daphne smiled. It was a genuine smile, one that reached her eyes. Gavin Lennox was kind, patient, and smart. They were taking it slow. No rush, no pressure. "Put the flowers in the lobby, Uriel," Daphne said. "Let everyone enjoy them." She got into the car. She checked her reflection in the rearview mirror. She didn't see a victim. She didn't see a divorcee. She saw Daphne Carter, CEO, sister, daughter. She saw herself. Daphne's journey wasn't just about money. It was about reclaiming the narrative of her own life. Felix Lawson thought he could discard people like objects, but he forgot that objects don't fight back. People do. In the end, the depreciating asset became the most valuable player in the game, proving that true worth isn't found in a bank account, but in the strength of your character when the world falls apart. If you enjoyed this story of justice served cold, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. What would you have done if you were Daphne? Would you have forgiven Felix? Or did he get exactly what he deserved? Let me know in the comments below.